him. If they're involved in sin, you need to get away from them. What do you mean? Because if they're doing wrong and they're out here carousing around and drinking and doing all kind of stuff, the Bible says that we're to break away from those kind of people. See, we're to love them, and if they need some food, to take them food. But don't fellowship with them because they'll think, you know what? Everything's all right. Everything ain't all right. You'll never be the same for your friends. See, I lost a lot of good friends in the ministry this season. I wish they were still pastoring today, but they're not. In fact, several years ago, there was a guy that, made a mistake, and he was one of the men that prayed for me to come out here to work with the Navajo people. And to this day, he's not even in the ministry. In fact, that church is closed down now. See, sin will never be the same for your friends. See, you can't run around with them like you used to. And let me say this, if you're doing that, they'll drag you down in their sin. See, I love people, but I know my limitations. If my friends started drinking and some of the preacher friends of mine got involved in sin and they started drinking, I'm not going to run around with them. Because I know what I'm like. Understand this will never be the same for David's friends. It'll never be the same for you and your friends. And let me say this, you don't believe me, you go to these funerals of these young people who they have buried in the last several years, and you see the hurt on their face. Sin will always affect everybody else.
Yeah.
That's right.
If it don't affect you, something's wrong. You know, it always bothers me when people chew their gum, Isaiah, and they're walking around like everything's all right. Everything ain't all right. If it don't bother you, something's wrong. You need a checkup. I'm not saying walk around here with doom and gloom. What I'm getting you to see is this, that we need to look at sin the way God looks at it. The third thing is this. Not only never be the same for David's family, never be the same for David's friends. Thirdly, it'd never be the same for David's country. See, sin affected Israel. The Bible says, look what it says in verse 14, howbeit, because this deed thou hast given great occasion to the enemies of the Lord to blaspheme.
Yeah.
See, sin always affects everybody else. Did you know that? See, your sin could affect this community. You know, if I got involved in sin and I had to go pastor in this church, it would affect this town. It would. Don't say it would. I'm not saying that I'm a celebrity or nothing. But I know this much. It would affect this town. It would affect you.
Yeah.
Some of you guys would get out of church and never go back. And you tell that preacher, said, listen, I had my preachers years ago got involved in sin, and he got out of the ministry. That church is shut down, and because of that, that's the reason why I don't go to church anymore. See, sin will always affect the country. See, your sin affected everybody else. It only affected his family, it affected his friends, but it affected his country. He says, you know what you done, David? He said, you gave these folks ammunition to shoot at us when we're trying to do things for God. And he says, listen, isn't that guy a Christian? And look what he's done. He's over here sleeping with other women and killing their husbands and doing this and doing that. Huh? Let me say this. When you get involved in sin, you make it hard for me to go out here to witness to other people. I'm just being honest with you. You know what they tell me? They say, listen, don't so-and-so go to this church, and the reason why I'll never get saved is because there are hypocrites in that church. And let me say, there are hypocrites everywhere.
That's right.
But your sin will give people great occasion against the men of God and against God's people, and it gives them ammunition that say, listen, I'll never get saved. And that's true. Remember, sin never keeps sin a secret. Keep it always out in the open. The Bible says, he said, he that covereth his sin shall not prosper, but whosoever confesseth and forsake it shall have mercy. Number 4 is this. It'll never be the same for David's service. See, guys, let me say this. You're a Christian today. And it does affect you on how you serve God. Those men I told you about can no longer pastor churches. Yeah. One was a pastor for over 40 years. He can never pastor anybody else. He can be a church member, but as far as his service, there's very limited in what he's doing. You know what you're doing? You don't realize that when you get involved in sin, it does affect how you serve God.
That's right.
Don't say it don't. It does. When you come to church and understand this, and man, you sit there and boy, they're preaching on sin or they preaching on this, and boy, your mind just running back to that sin or that thing that you're doing in your life, and you want to just get rid of it, and you wish you'd never done it. It does affect you in your service for God. Yeah. Don't tell me it don't. It does. You know, the Christians are no longer in church because of sin, and they let it affect them. And not only that, their service for God is very limited. Yeah. They can only do a certain amount in their life. I'm not saying you can't come to church and get your life right. Let me say this to you. You need to get away from sin, basically. Leave it alone. Man. I preached a message up at camp during the summertime, and I wrote these little signs out, and it says, keep out. You know, when we see that word keep out, as teenagers, you know what we say? Let's go try, let's go beyond that point. You know what I mean? I ain't got no sin, so I might as well just climb that fence and go and see what's, hey, when somebody says keep out, they're just telling us come on in. Just be honest. Isn't that what it says? Isn't that what it says, teenager? Keep out? Oh, no. Let me say this. When I was raised in Oklahoma, they had signs posted on the beginning there that says keep out. They mean keep out. The guy that usually owned that property usually traveled around his property carrying a gun. And if he catches you inside there, he will pull it on you, find out why you're on his property. And I had another sign that says no one beyond this point. You ever seen that? You might as well say, come on in, because folks says, listen, I know it says authorized personnel only, but I'm going to go in and see what's going on. You know what I mean? They'll go in here and look around and touch things, and you know, pretty soon they don't realize what they've done. Yeah. Or you see that sign that says hazardous material. I know it says hazardous material, but man, let's rub it on our face and see what it's going to do. Huh? Am I right? You know, people today don't realize when it says do not inhale or do not take, they just say, well, you know what? I know it says that, but it means that for everybody else. I had cousins that sniffed. You know what sniffing is? They used to take those paint cans and they would cut the top of the lid off, and what they would do, they'd take the bag out and they would sniff that all day long. Indian boys about your age sniffed all the time. I had a couple of cousins that are dead because they sniffed. They sniffed so much that they couldn't buy no paint, so they sniffed Pam and it killed them. They don't drink, they sniff. You know what they thought? They thought, you know what? I know it means, you know, it's deadly. But I know that means for somebody else because I know who I am and I'm pretty strong. See, sin is a lot stronger than you are. Yeah. You don't believe me? You go drive around this town. You look at folks and they're addicted to alcohol and drugs and meth, and you know what? They can't control it. And boy, I tell you what, they want to control it. I used to go into behavior health, and some folks don't know if they even have a behavior health here. You go right there before the hospital, you drop down that way, there's a little place called behavior health. That's alcoholics and drug addicts who are 11 to 18 years old.
Yeah, sad.
For 3 years, I went in there every Monday and held a Bible study. You talk about paranoia. They hear all kind of voices in their head, and all kind of stuff, and man, they're shaking and carrying on, and I'm trying to hold a Bible study with them and preach to them and love them. And let me say this, you know what we think? We think sin is all right as long as, you know what, I'm enjoying it, and you know what, just leave me alone, preacher, because I'm all right. Guys, let me say this, it'll never be the same. The fifth thing is this.